Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. This is Dan here with the Mandarin Podcast. Today I'm joined by Andrew Turner, who is a veteran and outspoken advocate on behalf of the Kratom community, someone whose life has been dramatically enhanced for the better by Kratom. And today we just want to give a little talk, letting people know what's going on with the Kratom community. A few months ago, the DEA filed a letter of intent stating they were planning to place an emergency ban on Kratom as a Schedule 1 substance among the ranks of the most hardcore drugs. And the reason they were doing this was there was a false assertion that Kratom has no medicinal value and that people were dying from it. Pretty much anybody involved in the Kratom community knows that people who the DEA were using to build their case were on a cocktail of drugs and just happened to also have Kratom in their system at the time of death. So after the ban was announced, there was an unprecedented rallying together. There was a hashtag going around, iamkratom, hashtag iamkratom, amongst many others, and hundreds of people were uploading videos on YouTube and all over the internet expressing how Kratom has helped them when nothing else could, or it helps them better than anything else could. So everyone in the Kratom community came out of the woodwork, and personally I was surprised to see how many people there were involved in this community. I thought I was one amongst maybe 1,000. Turns out I was wrong, but there was a White House petition that surpassed hundreds of thousands of signatures, and today, with the new administration with Donald Trump in the White House, there's a new petition that's been going on for a while, and I'm joined by Andrew Turner today to talk about that. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts, Andrew, if you could kind of introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know. I found you originally through the iamkratom videos that you did after the original ban was announced. But kind of what's your experience with Kratom? Why do you take it? What's your background? And just kind of general information about what's going on.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. It's a long intro.
So as you said, my name's Andrew Turner. Since September, I've been a very outspoken advocate for the legalization of Kratom. And there's a reason I say the legalization, because ultimately right now, Kratom sits kind of in a limbo where it's kind of between being completely legal and accepted as a supplement and completely illegal, like the DEA directed us to. But about 2 years ago, well, actually just over 2 years ago now, I was dealing with, I'm a disabled veteran. I was dealing with a condition called Meige syndrome, Meige. It causes pretty severe facial tics in my neck, spasms throughout my throat and my neck. It's a fairly rare movement disorder. Okay. They don't really know exactly what causes it. It came on in 2013. And then, but there was probably signs that it was happening even while I was still in the military up until 2012, because I was experiencing signs of tics in my face, but they just weren't very drastic, and it steadily got the condition worsened. Okay. But we're still not sure when it first manifested. But in 2013, I was officially diagnosed with Meige syndrome. That started having to go through a long day at the emergency room at the VA, where at first they thought I was having a stroke or a heart attack or some other very serious issue. And luckily there was a doctor there that recognized what it was. And then further on after that, scheduled me for nerve studies and other things to confirm his suspicions. And I worked with him on like a medication regime. But the problem is with Meige syndrome, it's worsened by anxiety issues. And I also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder from, multiple overseas deployments. So of course that exacerbates the issue. Pain makes it worse. Well, I also have degenerative disc disease, and I have a mostly non-functioning hand from injuries while I was in the military. So that exacerbates the issue. So it became this big kind of hula hoop of sorts, trying to figure out what medications would work for what, and then other medications to deal with the side effects, and then other medications, and then other medications. And pretty soon, at one point in 2013, I was taking 8 to 10 different, pills and injections a day to deal with all these different issues going on. And it pretty much turned me into a zombie. You know, it was very common that I'd spend a day stuck on my couch or in my bed. It wasn't strange for me to have accidents where I wouldn't make it to the bathroom. You know, and when you're in your early 40s, you don't think that that's going to be the situation, and you start to lose a lot of hope when nothing's working. Well, with Meige syndrome especially, there's not a lot of really well understood medications because they just don't really understand the disorder itself and what causes it exactly and how to treat it. So it's just kind of a trial and error guinea pig thing for most people with dystonias, with movement disorders like that. And sadly, nothing was working. They had me on a regimen of baclofen and Klonopin and Ativan, and it just wasn't working. And then when you add on the narcotic pain pills that I was on for my back and my hand, and you add on the other things I was taking, it just made me into this big mess, and nothing was working. So in about 2014, I reached a point of desperation, and you know, as most know, there's a very large suicide issue in the veteran community. Yes. I didn't want to become a statistic, and my doctors didn't want that either. And I think they recognized that I was hitting a point of hopelessness. And so my doctors suggested I look into some natural solutions, because at this point, the pharmaceutical options, that we'd pretty much exhausted most of the options they could try with me. And the few other ones they even thought about were still kind of difficult to get approval for. And may or may not work anyway, and they'd have to really be able to say, yes, this will work to get that kind of approval, and they couldn't do it. So one of my doctors, luckily, was a decades long researcher at NIH and other places before going to the VA, and he said, there's stuff out there that might help. He goes, I can't suggest any. He goes, I know people are using CBD oil. He goes, but it's not legal here. Mm-hmm. So he says, do a little research. He goes, you've said that you have time on your hands, which I did. I had no job at that point. I couldn't functionally work. I couldn't functionally do much of anything. I needed, pretty much round the clock care by my wife at that point. And so, he put that bug in my ear and said, go take a look around and see if there's something that might help you. And we'll look into it. And so I for several weeks I was online looking into it, kept coming across Kratom.
Yeah.
I kept hearing about it, and I kept seeing people talking about it, and I said, this is impossible. There's no way something does this much and helps this many people, and yet the doctors aren't all over this. At least that's what I thought at that time, because I didn't know anything about herbal medicine. I didn't know anything about natural solutions. My limited knowledge of that was like the bark off an aspen tree is what originally they came up with aspirin from. But other than that, I didn't know much about herbal medicines.
Yeah, when you hear about these herbal medicines, it's always like, well, it's too good to be true. This thing, it can't be that effective or whatever. There's always these assumptions with anything you buy at the store or read about. It's like, there's no way. And then you find Kratom, and sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. And that's exactly it. I think this is a shared story, and again, like you said earlier, you thought you were one of a few, maybe 1,000 people. So did I. I had been around the advocacy groups. I knew a few members from the American Kratom Association just in passing and talking and sending some donations here and there. But, there'd never been this push to make it federally illegal. And so I kind of sat back after almost, nearly 2 years of this relief that I'd gotten and this hope back in my life. And, even my doctors monitor me on a regular basis. We do blood work, and even they're amazed at the amount of relief that I've gotten. And so in September, when this dropped, I was running a business, and I said, I can't keep doing this and run the risk that this hope is going to be taken away from me. So I said, I'm going to do everything I can. And that included shutting down my business. So wow. I could dedicate every bit of my time to keeping this plant legal, because there is no way in hell they're going to take this away from me. And I don't want, purely for selfish reasons. And I'd be the first to tell everybody that on day one, on September 1st, when this all hit the fan, I had purely selfish motives. I didn't care if anybody else had access to it. At that time, I wanted it to stay legal for myself. And so I said, I've got to do whatever I can to get it legal. Now, in that time frame, I've heard so many stories and I've learned so much about other people, and it's become a family to me. And so it is more about a big group and not myself anymore. But initially, this was, when I stepped in, and started doing what I did, it was purely for selfish reasons. But, on day two, on like the September 2nd, the DEA, I made a call to them, and that was my first video for YouTube, which I made it because I was hoping some friends would donate money to AKA. That was all that was for. I never intended to become some shining beacon for advocacy. I just wanted to try to help in some way, just like you're doing. I wanted to help in some way, and I didn't really know how I could. And so I said, after that, this really disappointing call to the DEA, I made that video to talk about, I was pretty upset. I was just, that call went pretty terribly in my eyes. And so I thought that I had to address it, and I felt like I needed to do it, that address directly to the DEA acting chief, Chuck Rosenberg.
Right.
And it seemed like that, I made the video, then I left DC for a few days on vacation to go see family out of state. And next thing you know, I've got 10,000 views on this video, and I don't even know what's going on. And, it was
that's such a powerful testament to what one person can do with their voice. I mean, people like me, I've been out of work for a few months now, looking for a career change, and I don't have money to give to places like the American Kratom Association. I just don't. So, but people think about money and they're like, maybe that's the only thing they can do, and they kind of stop there. But our influence with our voices on social media is so much. Just sharing a post every day on Twitter or Facebook or Tumblr or Instagram, or just sharing your story, getting something out there. There's so many options for ways people like you and me can get involved and contribute to the betterment of this movement without having to put a dollar in there. And of course, if you can give money, that's probably the best way, honestly, with the work with Susan Ash at the AKA is doing. But that video you made, it got such a good response, so many views, and I saw an authenticity in that video that I was attracted to, and a passion that I was attracted to, and I think other people saw that. And it was videos like that that made this community feel like, wow, there's other people out there who aren't so different from me. And I know I cut you off, but I just wanted to go back and touch on, years ago, my doctors, my psychiatrists were trying me on a cocktail, a bevy of different antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs. I was tried on maybe 3 or 4 of these, from Prozac and other drugs I can't even pronounce the names of. Some of them made me feel like I was getting electrocuted, literally. Some of them made me gain a lot of weight, or made me feel like I was just losing my mind, or just completely numb altogether. And they also had me on benzodiazepines, which were highly addictive, and I didn't realize. I decided I wanted to get off all these medications, all these sleeping medications that were giving me hallucinations. These are all things my doctor told me would be fine to take, and I was ignorant at the time, but I decided I don't want to be on these anymore. I feel like a guinea pig. They're trying to test me on all these drugs. I need to find another option. I'd rather just suffer than be, put through all these crazy medications and these antidepressants, because really what they prescribe you is just their best guess. There's no one size fits all pill, and there's so much that's unknown about the brain. So that's why I prefer to take something that's natural, unaltered. But that's when I found Kratom, and I was like, oh, well, it helps with my depression, anxiety, helps me have energy. It put me back to work and all these other things. And it felt like a miracle, So I know I cut you off there, but I just wanted to say, someone like you who's had pain and physical symptoms, and myself, I've had also had, PTSD and depression. It just helps with so many things. And I don't know, I just felt like I had to get that out there and say that there's just so many things that kratom should be investigated for, so many potential uses, and there's no evidence of it really killing anybody. So it would be a complete shame if the nail was put in the coffin now and research was stifled so much. But I know I cut you off and I want to let you get back to what you were saying, but I also do want to tell people about, because we're 15 minutes in now, this new petition, because, like most people know, Donald Trump is the new president. Our last petition got hundreds of thousands of signatures, and now we have a new petition for, Donald Trump and what's going on over there. But our first petition did really well and people really came together. And then when the DEA announced they were kind of postponing or delaying the ban, it seems like people kind of fell apart and like, oh, we won, it's over. But it's not over. Like you say in all of your videos, this isn't over yet. And I just want to make sure people know, I'm going to put a link in the description to this video or wherever else it's posted, letting people know where that petition is, because we only have a couple days left to get the signatures on that. And those things do make a difference. Those things do, if we get the signatures, we're going to get more media coverage. We're going to be on more news stories. Maybe there'll be more trending. And that's the kind of thing we need to bring this to the light, because as much as you and I can do for this, it's a much bigger picture. And there's so many more people that could benefit from kratom besides just you and me. So I'm not sure exactly where I cut you off, but I've been holding that for a while, and it was unprofessional of me, but I had to get it out.
That's quite all right. No. That's what's good about this interview is this is just a conversation where we can definitely go back and forth and make points when they need to be made. And definitely what you're saying is very important, that petition is kind of an integral part right now of bringing the community back together, because that's kind of one of the biggest issues is people are going to steadily kind of move away if they feel that there's lessened of a threat to this staying legal in the way it is. And they need to understand that the threat has not lessened in any way. Just because the DEA has opened and then closed that comment period, that there is still every bit of a threat to this plant becoming illegal. You know, and that's kind of a big problem. And that's going to stay a problem for us, because until we can get to a point where there's some legitimacy to the market itself and some kind of standards given, we're always going to run this risk, because there is outside groups that want to see kratom banned and they want it gone.
I would say it definitely could use regulation, because what you get from a vendor at your local, head shop or smoke shop may not be the same thing you get online. And then within different online vendors, there's a lot of differences, but having some sort of quality control, maybe some sort of age limitation even, would be a good thing. They even have a bunch of facts over on this petition. Kratom is a coffee-like herb. It's not an opioid. A world-leading drug addiction expert has concluded that kratom is no more dangerous than nutmeg or St. John's wort, which is another herb, I believe, for depression and such. Kratom is not addictive. It creates about as much dependency as caffeine. There's no documented deaths tied solely to kratom. And there's a whole list of, facts here, or what they're calling facts on the petition. And I think people are afraid of this because, they don't want to put their name on this, petition and then feel like, oh, the DEA saw my name amongst hundreds of thousands and they're going to come kick my door in. There's nothing illegal right now. So you can put your name on this petition and you don't have anything to worry about. It's a legal petition. This is how, democracy works. You need to take action, and this is a chance where we can actually do that.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing that a lot, I've actually talked to at least a few people that have expressed concern about putting their name on this petition versus the last one. And I said, but what's the concern? Oh, well, we have a new president and he's going to give new guidance and there's going to be, and I said, but you're not doing anything illegal, and signing a petition doesn't even say that you use kratom in any way. It just says that you want it to stay legal.
Right. That's right.
And once they kind of grasp that, they generally that anxiety that may exist is lessened because they realize, hey, I'm not even saying I'm taking kratom in any way. I'm just saying that I support it staying legal, and this is why.
Right.
And definitely, it would be nice. It would be wonderful that the kratom market could stay the way it is because it's inexpensive.
Yep.
And the one big concern, and I hear this over and over with regulation, is it will make it too expensive for the average person to get. And I totally understand that. And they're right. To an extent, they're right. But theoretically, the larger the market can become through legitimacy, the cheaper the product can start to return to. Now, is it going to return to the levels that we saw pre-proposed ban? Probably not. We're probably never going to see, there's probably going to be costs that are going to be pushed on to the consumer in some way. We see some vendors that already charge large amounts of money, but a lot of those vendors that are charging that are also setting up specific standards in their packaging shop to keep it, extremely sanitary. They're sifting all their product. There's even a few that are, from what I understand, are even having their product tested. Now, does that mean for alkaloid content? I don't know, because a lot of them really don't share that information with me. The ones that I speak to aren't really telling me their business plan, and I don't blame them. I understand that.
Right.
Because there's always going to be that concern of somebody else stealing your ideas. But at the end of the day, that legitimacy of the market is what's going to keep it legal. And if we try to shy away from some form of regulation, and we continue to say kratom is 100% safe, there's no risks, we're going to run into a problem because that's kind of setting us up for failure. We have to accept the fact that there is some risks in taking it. They do exist. Are they great risks? No, not really. For the average person, the risks are minimal if they educate themselves in advance about what they may be facing. Occasionally there's going to be some people that are going to have some health issues with anything they take. There's people that get high blood pressure from drinking too much coffee. Mm-hmm. The problem is without this legitimacy in the market, you can't talk legally. Like a vendor can't talk about dosage. They can't say, well, this is what the average person would use, like they could with, say, like ginkgo biloba supplements. If you buy them at the store, it'll say take 4 capsules for this dosage, and this is considered the safe dosage for that market. And then it says, but these statements are not FDA approved. The problem with kratom is they can't even say that because, without some type of old or new dietary, ingredient instruction built in by law, we're stuck at the not for human consumption. And we can't stay there. We can't. It's if the market stays at that, we're going to wind up having it illegal before we know it. We have to face the facts that we have to legitimize the market, and that makes it safer for the consumers. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think there needs to be some sort of filtering process, some sort of quality control that says, this is what's in this is the percentage of these elements. And I think that would benefit everybody. It might come with a cost, physical price, but I think those things would ultimately be pro-consumer, having those sort of labelings and such, and just letting people know, where is this coming from? How has it been checked? Is this safe? Just as far as, how it's grinded up. Sometimes the way you grind up leaves, certain metals can leave traces in there. So just things like that can really make it a better market.
Yeah, no, I think that's and I think that most vendors and consumers are at a point where they realize that we have to look at what we would consider public legitimacy, because we as consumers know Kratom is a legitimate product. But at the end of the day, there's been some less than scrupulous vendors, in the past that have mixed things into it. That's already been proven. We know, and I'm not just saying here in the U.S. I mean, because that brings up.
Those are small, controlled cases.
Sure.
I mean, I've only heard of that after the ban was announced. I never personally have heard of anybody doing that outside of a newspaper headline. I know that there was one kind of kratom called Krypton and another overseas somewhere that had some sort of actual opiate put inside of it and was causing deaths. I forgot what it was, tramadol or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it was it was a variant of the tramadol alkaloids. It wasn't tramadol. It was something even probably a little bit worse than the tramadol that people would get here over the market. And tramadol's dangerous as it is. An
extremely rare case to see someone actually do that. Such a
I don't know that I wouldn't say that it's a rare case, because we don't know 2 to 3 years ago what was going on, because that's when that was happening. And that was happening in Europe, not here in the US.
In 8 years I've, taken it, I've never heard of this until now. And I've gone to dozens of dealers, or vendors online for this, and I've never had or heard of anybody mention this. So that's what I mean by rare, at least in my subjective point of view. And I think a lot of other people would agree, but you're right. We don't really know. And that's,
I think that it was rare I think it was rare here in the US. I think in Europe, they ran into some bigger issues with research chemicals. That's where that Krypton was at. It wasn't here in the US. It was like in Sweden. And there's been some issues with research chemicals put in. Is it a common occurrence? Absolutely not. No, I totally agree. Very rare, but it was happening and it was being marketed, in Europe. And so at the end of the day, that runs that problem, because we're not really just looking at the DEA and the FDA are not just looking at what happened here in the US. They're looking at Krypton. And so that's something that the DEA and FDA keep bringing up, is what happens when these people start doing this, or they start making extracts, or they start. And so that's where we need that legitimacy.
A certain group, this is like with any group that you want to label, if you want to say kratom advocates, if you want to say, liberals or Republicans or anything, there's always a certain segment of any group of people that's going to do something that the other part of that group don't agree with, which is why I think on a bigger scale that sometimes labeling things, in that sense can be an issue, because, maybe there's people out there that want that kind of thing, but someone could take, whatever they put in Krypton, put it in coffee or put it in cereal.
Sure.
I mean,
Great points.
Those people out there's always going to be people that are, looking for ways around whatever system there is, whether it's legal or not.
Right. No, I agree. And that's, I mean, as long as we accept that that's happened and we work toward a legitimate market, we won't have those problems per se in the market itself. And I think that's all I was kind of focusing on. Not that this was something that was a big cause for concern, but the problem is the people that want it banned, this is their concern. This is how they're going to present it as a problem. And the average person in Congress, the average Joe Public in the middle of America, they don't know any better. So we have to have legitimacy.
This petition is so important, because if we don't get this petition, if we don't come together, then maybe we aren't even going to have the chance to legitimize the market. We need everybody to come together. And that's why the point of this video, coming to wrap up here, I wanted to ask questions, for anybody out there who wants to have questions answered. You can leave a comment on this video. I'm assuming Andrew will maybe check the comments, but if not, I'll be here checking the comments.
I'll check
I'm not
in.
sure how many people are going to watch this, but I feel like the more places there are for people to connect and come together on something and not have to be afraid about, whatever, the better. And the more information we can kind of bring together and resources we have, the better for the possibilities here. So, is there anything you want to say in closing, or any final thoughts, or anything you want to plug? Your Twitter, maybe?
Actually, if anybody out there is listening and you enjoy podcasts and you want to listen to, I generally do updates about the Kratom fight each week. But if you like to listen to politics blended with a little bit of pop culture and you're on the podcast apps or iTunes, please check out Nerds Take on the World.
Nerds Take
Other than
on
that,
the World.
Yeah, that's my new podcast. We launched it a few weeks ago. And I'll definitely check in on your video. So if there's any questions that come up directed towards me, I'll be glad to answer them however I can.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I'll definitely be checking personally. And if you want to drop by, what's the Nerds Take the World podcast about, real quick?
Okay, so Nerds Take on the World. My friend Kelly and myself. My friend Kelly is a cannabis advocate here in DC. He also is a fellow nerd like myself. We're very into pop culture, into toy collecting and movies and etc. But we also sit around and talk politics. Being here in DC, I've worked in veteran advocacy before. I actually ran a veterans nonprofit for several years. So politics is just part of our daily life. And so we said, let's launch this podcast. This gives us a little bit of time to talk about Kratom and CBD and marijuana legalization and all these other issues. But at the same time, let's just talk about what we generally talk about, and maybe somebody will find interest in it. So that's what we did when we launched.
That's the great thing about this format of podcast. Anybody can just sit down, say what's going on, and no
For
filters,
sure. Yep.
That's very cool. I'll try to put a link for that in the description as well, so people can find your podcast. And just want to thank you for joining me here on the Mandarin Podcast. You can check out more videos or leave a question down below. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. And until next time,